The month of December started with another teaser of the future potential system update, and this time they gave us a video on Twitter showcasing that amazing quality of life update. Like, we were finally going to be able to activate multiple potential nodes at the same time. It's actually crazy that it took them a year to do so, but like I said previously, better late than never. A week later, it was already time for another World Tournament and a new World Tournament LR. So it looked like Int LR Piccolo has officially been replaced as the local World Tournament reward card. As far as I know, he was still available in the World Tournament banner as an unfeatured SSR, but that was the only way you could obtain him moving forward. The new World Tournament LR wasn't as good as LR Piccolo was on release, but still an LR nonetheless. They had a 20% chance of stunning the attack enemy for 2 turns on their 12 key super, and a 25% chance of doing the same thing on their 18 key super. So I guess this was decent for Super Battle Road. They had 10,000 attack when their key was 8 or more, 10,000 defense when their key was 11 or more, and an additional 10,000 attack and defense when they had 14 or more key. So a total of 20,000 attack and defense when above 14 key. Like, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't anything crazy, especially for an LR. That would take almost a year to rainbow for a regular player. And their link set was also not great, so that didn't help. Like, honestly, for the most part, this wasn't a great LR. But just for a free play card, they were good, and could help you in the Super AGL Super Mario stage if you had no better option. The World Tournament also added some new units to the World Tournament banner. Cian was honestly not bad for an SSR. He raised his attack and defense by 30% for 6 turns on super, had a high chance of launching up to 2 additional attacks, and each attack had a high chance of becoming a super attack, so this guy could potentially super up to 4 times within the same turn. But like the other Dragon Ball Saga cards, he was cursed with a terrible link set, so you unfortunately couldn't run him anywhere outside of Jackie Chun's team at the time. SR Chaitsu was okay for an SR, like he could stun and debuff the attack enemy defense, but that was about it. Manwolf and Pemput were ours, so not even worth going over. As for the new World Tournament reward card, In Gohan was I guess alright, like he raised his attack and defense by 30% of super for 3 turns, had 3 key at the start of turn, and 60% attack and defense when facing 1 or 2 enemies. So genuinely an alright card. Nothing you could bring it to Super Bad Road, but he could do well in Dokkan events. The thing is, people had been waiting for a long time for a Gohan with that armor from the Cell Saga, but they actually wanted him in his Super Saiyan state, not in base, so I guess that was disappointing. 3 days later, and they put a notice in the news saying that the potential system event was going to get renewed, like they were going to increase the number of potential orbs that you can obtain from the event, I guess to go alongside that new quality of life update that they teased before. The update 3.8.2 came out the next day, and you were now finally able to unlock multiple nodes all at once in the hidden potential system. It just took a year and 2 teasers, but we got there. I wonder how many years it will take them to fix the friend system. Another day later, and it was already time for the Christmas campaign. It was going to have your typical Logan bonus campaign, a new double rates banner, some new godstones, and some new events. They also teased the next EZ around the same time, and it looked like it was going to be for the first Dokkanfest, Strength Broly. 4 days later, and they teased the next Dokkanfest? Well, that's what people probably thought at the time. And bro, is it just me, or like that teaser is literally hurting my eyes? Like, what the hell is that? Anyways, Tapion was out the next day. He was just a regular banner unit featured on a new double rates banner. He introduced the giant form category into the game, leading it for 3 key and 150% HP attack and defense, and also increased the maximum number of times the units on his team could turn into a giant form by 1. So genuinely a very good leader skill. But the thing is, that team had 10 characters at the time. 10 characters, so your options were very limited, but for sure it was a fun team if you had like enough giant form characters to run it. And yeah, AGL Tapion was a phenomenal Super Mario unit. He lowered attack on super, had 50% damage reduction at the start of turn, which means you just needed a Whis or Icarus active for him to pretty much be invincible, and even without items he could still tank decently well after lowering the enemy's attack a couple of times. And when you drop below 50% HP, he also gained 150% attack and 50% defense, so he was even tankier and could now put up some decent numbers. But the crazy part was that he could also transform into Hero Dokkan once per battle, so you could potentially have 3 turns of invincibility at least once every battle. Like, you had no idea how broken that was. It's actually thanks to this guy that I beat my first SBR category stage. Like, he was just so good. The only problem with his transformation at the time is that he would go from super to extreme. So if your leader didn't cover the extreme type, well, his giant ape transformation had no leader skill, so it did no damage, which was kind of countering the whole point of having 3 turns of invincibility. But yeah, this wasn't that big of an issue, since most monotype leaders by that point were leading both the extreme and AGL class of their respective types. AGL Tapion also came with a new tech Tapion, who was also very good. He was a God's leader for the super tech type, which was actually decent. He lowered attack on super, had 80% attack and defense at the start of turn, a 30% chance of performing a critical hit, and was a rainbow orb changer. Like, this guy was actually insane for a regular banner unit. Like, since he had built-in crit in his passive, you could just give him full additionals, meaning you had twice the chances of lowering the enemy super within the turn, which was crazy in SBR. And that orb changing ability just meant that he was a must run on any team he could be ran on that had some big LRs who needed a lot of key to super. And talking about LRs, that double race banner came with exactly that, an unfeatured LR who needed a lot of key and who was also tech. LR's per Century Goku was phenomenal already. His leader skill was obviously very good for super battle mode, like 4 key was nothing to laugh at. He had a 20% chance of stunning the attacked enemy for 2 turns on his 12 key, which was also very good in SBR. He greatly lowered the attacked enemy's defense on his 18 key, had 120% defense at the start of turn, which was a huge buff for an LR. Like, he was pretty tanky if you didn't launch his ultra super, because yes, the second part of his passive gave him an insane 180% attack buff when he ultra supered. But the catch here was that he also lost 70% defense, but he was just hitting so hard that barely anything could survive an 18 key super from him. So the defensive loss wasn't that big of an issue. Like, it didn't bring his defense to 0 like the Brolys. Like, on average, this was probably the new best unit in the game. At his peak, Int LR's percent Gohan was probably better, but on average, LR's percent Goku was the better unit. The only thing is that he shared the same name as the easy AGL's percent Goku, so you couldn't run them both on the same team. But this guy was definitely better than the easy, so that just pushed both the Majin Buu Saga and Super Sentry category teams to the top. Like, those teams were probably the best teams in the game if you had all of the premium units. His card art was also so cool. Like, that was for sure the best card art at the time. Now, was the double race banner good? Well, it had 10 featured units. No guaranteed SSR, but every multi-summons gave you 2 Centaroshis. So with those 2 guys, and I think close to like a 10% chance of just pulling an unfeatured LR, yeah, that banner was actually very good and probably worth your stones. I know I would have summoned at the time. Now, let's talk about Tapion's Dokkan event, because that event was so annoying at the time, since you needed the Tapion's fruit to reduce Herodegarn energy bar, or else he would just dodge all of your attacks. But thankfully you could farm that item on the Z-Hard stage of his Dokkan event, something that I didn't do at the time because I just didn't read. That Dokkan event also came with a new farmable Tapion. Physical Tapion wasn't anything crazy, like sure he lowered attack on super and debuffed extreme class enemies when above 80% HP, but he was still an SSR with very low stats, so not really great. As for the new story event, it introduced 3 new free play units. In Great Saiyaman was not bad for an SSR. He raised his attack by 50% on super for 3 turns, had 40% attack at the start of turn, and also gave super class allies on rotation 20% attack. So not bad, but not something you would bring into Super Battle World. Physical Great Saiyaman 2 was the defensive version of In Great Saiyaman. She lowered attack on super, had 60% defense at the start of turn, and gave 40% defense to super class allies on rotation. The 2 Great Saiyamans actually linked pretty well together, but like I said earlier, they weren't anything you could bring into SVR. Tenki Trunk was actually a much better unit. He had a supreme damage multiplier, a 50% attack on super, and a 30% crit chance built into his passive. Like sure, his links sucked, but for a free play unit, he could do some decent damage thanks to his attack on super and built-in crit chance. At the same time, it was also said in the news that Dokkan had been selected as the App Store's best of 2017. And honestly, I'm not surprised. That year was crazy for Dokkan. Like, they released so many crazy units. I have no idea how people kept up with the game. But yeah, to thank the player base, they gave everyone 1000 potential orbs of each type. So 5000 potential orbs. So pretty good for the time. They also added some new missions to the Dokkan Speed Battle event. I don't know what happened to that event, but I'm pretty sure that's the last time we've ever heard anything about it. As for the Gold Stone, now that easies were a thing, I genuinely think that the free Red Stone had more value than the paid Blue Stone. Like, we saw how crazy the first easy was, so people only assumed that the other ones were going to be at least on the same level, if not better. The next day, the game had hit top grossing. They didn't give any stones, just 3000 AGL and tech type potential orbs, which I guess was still good. Almost a week later, and it was already time for the New Year celebration. And let me tell you, that celebration was insane. They really ended the year with peak. They basically started the celebration with an insane login bonus campaign, giving at least 2 stones every day until the end of the year. We then had the easy of Strength Broly, a very strong easy. Broly went from having a mass damage multiplier to a supreme damage multiplier, while also raising his attack by 50% on super for 3 turns. Add to that the stat increase and the SA15, and he was already looking pretty damn good. But then they gave him 80% attack and defense when attacking. Like, this was a very very good buff for a unit that pretty much had LR stats rainbowed. He was definitely a beast, but unfortunately LR Broly was still better than him in the World Tournament due to his built-in additional super attack. So just like the easiest first entry Goku, this guy was only good if you didn't have his LR counterpart. As for his EZA event, it was hard but definitely easier than Goku's EZA. He was weak to the Hybrid Saiyans category, a category that wasn't as limited as the Resurrected Warriors one. And the thing is, the HL type was so good that you could generally just brute force his event with a mono HL team. Like, it wasn't easy, but definitely doable if you had the right HL cards. Like, HL Tapion was a beast there, thanks to his giant transformation and damage reduction. His EZA banner was also way better than the previous one. It featured HL's percent Blue Kaioken Goku and HL's percent for Vegeta, who was actually very good on his EZA event thanks to his defense and super attack counter. The next day, they teased the end of the year Dokkanfest. And guess what? It was going to be a new Rosé and a new Vegito Blue. Yes, another one. We also got the second legendary campaign, this time for LR Android 17 and 18. They kind of nerfed the rewards, like they gave 15 less stones than the previous time, but those missions were way easier to clear. Like Religion given 3 copies of their SR just by beating Dokkan event stages. Then you were given 17 stones and 17 box space when you awakened them into LRs, and an additional 18 stones, 18 box space and 10 Elder Kais if you raised the super attack level to 20. And just like Goku, were refunded all of the potential orbs you used on them if you rainbowed them. They also opened all of the Dokkan event stages, so you didn't have to wait for a specific event to be rotated for you to farm their awakening medals. And the AGL type potential orb event was also available daily, so you could easily rainbow them. So genuinely a decent campaign. The next day, and it was already time for the end of the year dual Dokkanfest. Rosé and Vegito Blue were rainbow leaders leading their respective class for tricky and 120% HP attack and defense, as long as you had at least one character of every type on their respective team. Like, this was genuinely insane. They were Rainbow Neo Gods leaders, meaning you could run all of the best cards in the game on their teams without worrying about categories or whatnot. And bro, they were phenomenal units by themselves, so that helped a lot. Tech Vegito Blue was the second unit ever to be able to stack defense on super, right after striking Dokkanfest Cell. But unlike Cell, this guy had built-in additionals in his passive. He had a great chance of launching up to 2 additional attacks, and each of them had a medium chance of becoming a super attack, while also building up his attack by 15% up to 150% with each attack launched. Like, you've got to understand, this guy was the APT god for years to come. Like, he was legit top 1 in every APT tier list for like a year straight. Like, he was really the GOAT, at least damage wise. But the crazy thing is that Rosé was arguably, possibly even better. Strike Rosé was an SVR beast, and probably the best extreme class utility unit the game had known so far. He raised the extreme class allies attack by 30% for 1 turn on super, had 120% attack at the start of turn, debuffed super class enemies attack and defense by 20%, and gave extreme class allies on rotation 3k and 50% defense. Like bro, that super type buff coupled with his amazing link set pretty much made him a staple on every single extreme class team you could run him on. And he also gave birth to one of the strongest rotation in Dokkan history. He shared 6 links with LR, Rosé and Zamasu. The LR looked like a completely new unit linked next to him, and thanks to Rosé's defensive support, the LR could actually get pretty tanky with a couple of supers. Like, that rotation just had everything. Damage, defense, utility, just everything. The Realm of Gods and Potara tiers were going to be absolutely crazy once they get proper leaders. Those two also came with some new banner units. Zamasu was insane, like an absolute beast of a unit. For sure one of the strongest banner unit in Dokkan history. He recovered 7% HP on super, had 40% damage reduction, but also defense. He could gain up to 60% attack and defense. The more HP you had, the greater the boost. Couple that with the defensive links that he had, and yeah, that guy was pretty much one of the best tanks in the game. But unlike someone like Angel Golden Frieza, he wasn't as restricted, and could put up some okay numbers, while also providing utility to the team with his healing on super. Like, this guy was truly built for not only Super Round Road, but every event in the game. Like, he was just a beast. For sure one of the best banner unit in Dokkan history. Strength percent Trunks was also phenomenal. He raised his defense on super by 30% for 6 turns, had 40% damage reduction at the start of turn, and raised his attack and defense by up to 120%. The less HP he had, the greater the stat boost. So yeah, best believe that this guy was an absolute monster defensively. You just needed him to super a couple of times, and there's pretty much nothing in the game that could touch him. But since he needed that initial build up and didn't have any sort of healing, he wasn't as good as Zamasu in Super Battle Road. Like, he was still a very good unit there, just not turn 1. You need to wait for him to super like a couple of times for him to actually be great there. But he was a goat in the Legendary Goku event like 2 years later. This just shows how well that unit aged. Honestly, those two guys were really some of the best bannering units we had seen ever during a dual Dokkanfest in the entire history of the game. It was crazy. Now, as for their banners, they both had your typical 3 multi-summons, get 1 free discounts for a week straight, but unfortunately still no guaranteed SSR per multi-summon. Vegito Blue's banner was honestly quite good. It featured Strength Ultimate Gohan, who was still insane, Strength Super Saiyan for Goku and Physical Super Sentry Gotenks, who were some of the best Neogods leaders, Angel Super Sentry Goku, who was now better than ever thanks to his Easy, and Tech Beerus, who obviously wasn't that great anymore, but he was going to Easy at some point, and could honestly still help you in Super Hard Road with his Rage form. Rosé's banner was also pretty good. It featured Physical Omega Shenron, who was still one of the best Extreme Class TUR, and 3 Neogods leaders. Like, Broly sucked, but Android 17 and Physical Cooler were still quite good. I would even say that Android 17 was better now than on release, thanks to his damage reduction. Like, he could cook an SBR. And Physical Goku Black was decent on Rosé's team. Like, he shared 6 links with Strength Rosé, so not a bad option. Fun fact about Rosé's banner, but on release the banner image featured the TUR of Super Sentry Broly, which was extremely misleading, because it made players think that if they summon on the banner and pull Super Sentry Broly, he will already be Dokkan Awakened into his TUR. So yeah, all of the players who summoned on the banner while Broly was displayed incorrectly got all of the Dragon Stones they used or founded, with an additional 5 stones gifted as an extra compensation. So no 300 stones this time around, but still, getting a full refound on one of the best banners of the year was a big W. But it's still crazy to me that they made 2 major mistakes like that in the span of 2 months. Like, what was Toshi doing, bro? The next day, the game hit top grossing again. Like, of course, how could these banners not hit top grossing? But you know what's crazy? They still didn't give out stones. Just another 3000 tech and strength type potential orbs. Dokkan were so cheap back then with stones. But what's so interesting is that everything changed as soon as Toshi left. I guess they at least thanked the players at the end of the year for like all of the support the game got in 2017, because yeah, that year was just crazy for Dokkan.